The Seattle Seahawks finished the 2025 season with a 14-3 record, were the number 1 seed in the NFC, and won the Super Bowl with a commanding victory 29-13 over the New England Patriots.
And that will do it. Seattle reigns above them all in the NFL.
And while it was a fun end to the season, it certainly didn't start out that way, and like with every NFL team, they went through their fair share of adversity. Whether it was a Week 1 loss to the 49ers in a game where Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only Seahawk to have more than 15 receiving yards,
Is he going to go? The ball is loose. The 49ers have it.
or like in Week 5, when Baker Mayfield and the Bucs went into Lumen Field and put up 38 points in a game where Baker threw for 379 yards and 2 touchdowns, and in a game where 2025 first-round pick Emeka Egbuka had 163 yards and a touchdown.
Deep, and he's got Egbuka! He's got him! Caught inside the 5!
Or, like in Week 11, the infamous 4-interception game from Sam Darnold at SoFi, in which Seattle lost 21-19. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for the 2025 Seahawks, but they battled back in a big way, and after throwing 4 interceptions against the Rams in Week 11, Sam Darnold had the game of his life in a 31-27 NFC Championship win as he threw for 346 yards and 3 touchdowns. Seattle did not turn the ball over after Week 16, and the results spoke for themselves. But how will this team play in 2026? Can the Seattle Seahawks repeat as Super Bowl champions? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video, and if you could like the video before we start, a football will appear when you do and would be very much appreciated. And with that out of the way, welcome to the 2026 NFL Team Preview Series. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing who the Seahawks lost in free agency as well as who they brought in free agency. And whenever a team wins a Super Bowl, they're naturally going to lose guys in free agency as well as coaches too. And the Seahawks lost 3 starters in free agency, which includes Super Bowl 60 MVP Kenneth Walker going to the Chiefs. They lost pass rusher Boye Mafe to the Bengals, as well as corner Riq Woolen going to the Eagles. And they also lost offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, who is now the Raiders head coach, and is being replaced by Brian Fleury, who is coming over from the 49ers. Now, whenever you think of the Seahawks defense, you probably think of Devin Witherspoon, or Leonard Williams, or Byron Murphy, or Nicky Manwari, but Boye Mafe was a quiet contributor for this team over the past few years, and had 40 or more pressures in each of the last 3 seasons. He played over 550 snaps in each of the last 3 regular seasons, and while he did only have 2 sacks last year, 40 pressures is nothing to scoff at, and replacing his snaps and production may be more difficult than people initially think. Now, the Seahawks did not win the Super Bowl because of Boye Mafe, of course, but he was a bigger contributor than people realize. And I know there were a lot of mixed opinions on Riq Woolen throughout his time in Seattle, and he would be remembered a lot differently in Seattle right now if they didn't beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game due to the taunting penalty, then immediately getting burnt for a touchdown by Puka Nacua. But again, this is a player that played over 800 snaps in each of the last 4 years, and you're looking at replacing over 1,300 snaps heading into the 2026 season just with those 2 players leaving in free agency. Now, with the loss of Kenneth Walker, this is a player that Seahawks fans have gotten in a lot of arguments about online this offseason. I personally think Kenneth Walker is a good running back, but him having a 116-yard, 3-touchdown performance in the divisional round against the 49ers, and going for a $135 in the Super Bowl, and of course being named the Super Bowl MVP, I think swayed people's opinion on who Kenneth Walker is as a player. He's obviously not bad, but I don't think he is who people think he is, and I don't think him going to the Chiefs in free agency is an insurmountable loss. And for reference, he has just 4 100-yard rushing games over the last 3 years. So while yes, there probably will be a difference without him there early on, as Zach Charbonnet is coming off of a torn ACL and Jadarian Price is a rookie that's going to be thrust in a tough situation early in his career, I don't think the Seahawks are doomed by the loss of Kenneth Walker, and 4 100-yard rushing games over the last 3 years is of course in the regular season. And we'll break down the offense a lot more during the offensive portion of the video too. They also lost defensive back Kobe Bryant to the Bears, who played nearly 1,000 snaps last year, and because of losing over 2,000 snaps between Bryant, Mafe, and Woolen, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of an adjustment period early on with the 2026 Seahawks defense. But one of the biggest things I'll hammer home, especially with this team, is as long as they're humming by December, which I expect them to be, I'm not worried if they drop a game or two in the early part of the season, just like they did last year. Now, whenever you win a Super Bowl, a lot of your priorities are to retain players, and that's largely what Seattle did this offseason. They brought back Rashid Shaheed and Josh Jobe, among others. They brought in pass rush specialist Dante Fowler to try and effectively replace Boye Mafe, as well as former first-round corner Noah Igbenogany for corner depth. And when you build your roster as good as John Schneider has, unfortunately the free agency period is pretty boring, because the reality is you're not going to do that much to bring in new players, and a lot of the time, you have to allocate money in the future to extend the current players already on your roster. The NFL season is quickly approaching, and if you are not aware, I recently moved to Charlotte, which puts me in Panther country. I have not been to an NFL game in a couple of years, and the Panthers play some really good teams this year, and there's a couple of games I may be looking to attend, which is why I'm really excited to announce the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app and has over 35 million downloads, and right now the MLB is in full swing, the NFL season is quickly approaching, and the World Cup is going on right now too. And SeatGeek has your back as each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know whether or not you're getting a good deal. Look for green whenever you're buying tickets, as green means good, red means bad, and this next part is one of the biggest reasons I wanted to partner with SeatGeek. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And of course, I have a code for you guys to use, which is code FootballAnalysis10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets using code FootballAnalysis10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Once again, that's code FootballAnalysis10 for 10% off any tickets on SeatGeek. And a big thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. Now, for the 2026 Seahawks defense, we mentioned having to replace Riq Woolen, Kobe Bryant, and Boye Mafe, and the effect of having to replace over 2,000 snaps between 3 players leaving this offseason. And we also mentioned that it may take a few weeks for the Seahawks defense to really adjust in 2026 before expecting them to find their place and be a true Mike Macdonald defense. Now, if you are a Seahawks fan and interpret this in a negative way, or think that I'm doubting the Seahawks this year defensively, let me be crystal clear when I say I'm not. This is a unit that finished first in points allowed last year, first in rushing yards allowed, second in EPA per play, were sixth in turnovers, and allowed less than 1.5 points per drive, which was also first in the NFL. And when Mike Macdonald left the Ravens to become the Seahawks head coach, a lot of Ravens players commented on how complex his defense is, but how easy Macdonald makes it to learn his defense, and how good of a teacher he is. And I don't mean to disrespect any of the guys who left, but they didn't lose Devin Witherspoon, Byron Murphy, or Leonard Williams, or Ernest Jones, Nicky Manwari, or DeMarcus Lawrence, and you get the point. They'll be fine. This defense is loaded. And as boring as this is with the Seahawks in 2026, I expect as good, if not better, play with another year of continuity from guys like Devin Witherspoon, Nicky Manwari, and especially Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. The Seahawks' defensive philosophy is to win with the front four, which I do believe will continue to happen in 2026, especially from a pass rushing standpoint with Murphy, Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Uchenna Nwosu. And I also expect Riley Mills, a 5th round pick from last year, who only played 28 snaps in the regular season, yet had a sack in the Super Bowl, to have a bigger role this year too. Seattle had one of the lower blitz rates in the NFL last year, and it was because it goes back to Macdonald being a good teacher and being able to keep the defense complex for opposing offenses to try and figure out, while being able to have his guys play fast and be able to get after the quarterback. And why I don't worry about this defense in 2026, really aside from major injury, is because they have the foundation in place. And for the purpose of team previews, we have to assume relative good health. I can't predict, nor will I predict players to get hurt, and try and factor in that, oh, this player actually is going to get hurt in week 4, and that's going to alter their season. So now we have to predict what this team is going to do after a said player gets hurt. So you get the point. The foundation with the Seahawks here is in place. Now, I made a video last last year talking about how the Seahawks were doing everything right as a franchise, and full transparency, I didn't think they'd win the Super Bowl in May of last year heading into the 25 season, but here we are. I get really excited about franchises doing things the right way, and this is what it looks like in real time. I am ecstatic to see how Mike Macdonald uses Nicky Manwari as a chess piece as the years go on, and I am ecstatic to see Devin Witherspoon and Byron Murphy continue to ascend, and especially Murphy. And I'm really excited to see Ernest Jones continue to man the middle of the defense along with Drake Thomas, who had a good year last year after playing just 42 snaps in the first 2 years of his career. My concerns with this team on the defensive side of the ball are very minimal. However, if I had to nitpick, it's that I worry about corner and edge depth. But it's not a coincidence this team was as good as they were last year. And as long as Mike Macdonald is the head coach, and as long as they stay relatively healthy, I won't say this about many teams entering the year, maybe Houston as another, but their floor is a top 10 defense. And their ceiling is, of course, the best defense in the entire NFL. With a team coming off of a Super Bowl title the way the Seahawks are entering 2026, the biggest thing we need to hammer home with this draft class is to have reasonable expectations. Not every year you're going to have Gray Zabel and Nicky Manwari start your draft class and have several other key contributors throughout the rest of the class, like Riley Mills getting a sack in the Super Bowl, or like second-round tight end Elijah Arroyo, who I think will be better in 2026 and especially as his career plays out, or even Torrey Horton, who had 5 receiving touchdowns as a rookie, and a player that I thought was a draft steal in 2025. So with the 2026 Seahawks draft class, we're going to start with their day 3 selections and work back. And whenever you look at the Seahawks draft class this year, their day 3 started with the 5th round selection of guard Bo Stevens. For the purpose of today's video, I think Bo Stevens is the only player with a 5th round selection or later that may have any meaningful contribution as a rookie. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to Emmanuel Henderson, Andre Fuller, Devin Eastern, or Michael Dansby, but what I would say specifically about a corner like Andre Fuller, who was selected in the 7th round out of Toledo, is I don't expect him to start or play meaningful snaps in year 1, because if he is, then we're looking at the possibility of somebody like Devin Witherspoon going down, Josh Jobe going down, and several other players in front of him going down before it would come to that point. Now, with Bo Stevens, this was a player I liked coming out of Iowa, and I think that there is a chance, maybe by the end of the 2026 season, maybe even as early as midway through the 2026 season, that there's a possibility he could be pushing for snaps or maybe have a position battle with right guard Anthony Bradford. I know Seahawks fans feel a very strong way about Anthony Bradford, and if you ask any Seahawks fan where one of the weaker links of the team is, or out of the 22 starters, a lot of the time Anthony Bradford is a name that comes up. So for the day 3 Seahawks selections, I don't think there's going to be much meaningful contribution from any of the guys, really with the exception of Bo Stevens, and even with receiver Emmanuel Henderson Jr., who was selected in the 6th round. Again, I don't think there's going to be a lot of contribution even as a returner, because Rashid Shaheed is a great returner. And then from a receiving standpoint, you of course have the reigning offensive player of the year in Jackson Smith-Njigba, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, Torrey Horton, and Jake Bobo above him. So for day 3 selections this year for the Seahawks, don't think there's going to be that much, but it's more of a compliment to how good the roster is. And if anybody's going to step up, I think it would be guard Bo Stevens. With Jadarian Price, the Seahawks' first-round pick, this is a player that I think is going to be a classic case of a player that's a better pro than they were college player. And with Jadarian Price, he was behind Jeremiah Love throughout his collegiate career. And why I think this benefits the Seahawks is because there's not a lot of tread on the tires. There's not a lot of touches on his body as he goes to the NFL. This is not a player that had 300-touch seasons during his time in college, where he's entering the pros with nearly 1,000 touches before he even takes his first NFL hit. This is a player that had less than 300 career touches during his time at Notre Dame, and one of the biggest things I liked about Jadarian Price was his blend of strength and ability to get in between the tackles and fall forward far more often than not. And during his final season with Notre Dame, he had 13 total touchdowns on 119 touches. That is an insane ratio, and obviously we don't expect that to continue at the NFL level, as if he had 238 touches this year, he would have 26 total touchdowns. I will go on record and say I don't think he's going to have that type of production, but why I think this pick is going to be beneficial for Seattle over the course of his career is for as much love as Sam Darnold received last year for overcoming his story and eventually winning the Super Bowl, and for JSN to win the Offensive Player of the Year. Believe it or not, the Seahawks finished third in the NFL in rushing attempts last year. Now, you can attribute that to them being up in games and them simply running the ball more in the second half, but their philosophy as a team is to play good defense and run the football. It is not a coincidence Seattle ran the football as much as they did last year, while also finishing 29th in passing attempts offensively. There's a correlation there, and that correlation is going to translate to Jadarian Price receiving a lot of touches in year one, and I will go ahead and say that I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor, but Zach Charbonnet tearing his ACL in the middle of January for the sake of Jadarian Price's rookie season will be beneficial for Jadarian Price early on because he's going to receive that much more volume. Now, what I will say about Zach Charbonnet's knee is you're probably going to hear a lot of things about like, man, nobody's treating rehab like Charbonnet is. He is an outlier. He's months ahead of schedule. This guy is going to look like not quite Adrian Peterson, but not far off either. He's a monster. And you hear that every year about players that are coming off of major injuries. We, of course, wish Zach Charbonnet and every player coming off of a major injury nothing but the best. But my point is, Jadarian Price is going to be in an advantageous situation, and with the Seahawks expected to be up in a lot of games, and with how good Jadarian Price is at getting into the end zone, because again, he had 13 total touchdowns last year on 119 touches, I wouldn't be surprised if he has double-digit touchdowns in year one, due in large part to how much the Seahawks run the football. And if he has double-digit touchdowns in year one, we could very easily be talking about a player that's in the Offensive Rookie of the Year conversation. With second and third round picks Bud Clark and Julian Neal, their usages will be interesting to watch over the course of the 2026 season. For Bud Clark specifically, I know he was drafted a round higher than Julian Neal, but I think he'll be on the field less than Julian Neal, mainly because I think there's a chance Julian Neal could eventually win the starting job from Josh Jobe or become the starter. I'm not the highest on Josh Jobe, and Julian Neal is a player that I think Mike Macdonald will love. He is a player that's going to be a menace in run defense. He's going to be a very hard-nosed and physical player, and I think he's going to be a guy that Mike Macdonald loves. And Josh Jobe had 10 penalties last year, and if he struggles down the stretch, then I think that there's a good chance that Julian Neal comes in and is a starter by the end of the 2026 season. Bud Clark's role is a little difficult to project because of Ty Okada and Julian Love both in front of him, and of course Nicky Manwari being a versatile chess piece in the defense as well, meaning he can line up anywhere. But I do like Bud Clark's ball production, and there's a reason he had as many interceptions as he did during his time at TCU, and I am a believer that if you have that many interceptions, that it's not a coincidence. And Bud Clark's usage throughout the course of the 2026 season is something I'm going to be paying attention to. I would like to think the long-term vision for him is to have a role similar to what Kobe Bryant was for Mike Macdonald in 2025, but with the safeties in front of him right now on the depth chart, I don't know how much he's actually going to play this year, but I do think this will be a good pick over the course of the next few years. Pertaining to the 26th season, I would be kind of surprised if he plays more than 400 or 500 snaps, which is a considerable role for a rookie safety, but I think that this is going to prove to be a long-term pick rather than one specifically for the 2026 season. We mentioned this during the offseason departures portion of the video, where Clint Kubiak is no longer the team's offensive coordinator as he is the Raiders head coach, and Brian Fleury will be the Seahawks offensive coordinator in 2026. Brian Fleury has been with the 49ers since 2019, and over the past 4 years was the tight ends coach, and in addition to being the tight ends coach in 2025, he was also the run game coordinator. Sam Darnold earlier this month said that there's not going to be that much of a transition period with Brian Fleury as the team's OC, and a lot of the time we talk about coach speak, and whenever you think of coach speak, you think of kind of things along the lines of, we're going to do a lot of things to get better, and just general things of, we'll take a look at this in the film room, and all of those coach speak phrases, right? And quarterbacks also do a lot of coach speak, if you will. You can call it QB speak if you want. And anyways, my point here with Sam Darnold is I genuinely believe what he's saying, because with Brian Fleury, this is a coach that has coached under Kyle Shanahan for the past 7 years. Clint Kubiak's dad is Gary Kubiak. Gary Kubiak coached under Mike Shanahan for over 10 years back in the day, and I don't think there's going to be that much of a difference between a Clint Kubiak offense in 2025 and a Brian Fleury offense in 2026. So while some people may see that quote from Sam Darnold and think, yeah, right, whatever, he's going to say that just to show support to his offensive coordinator publicly, believe it or not, heading into the season, I genuinely believe Sam Darnold within that, because it's not like Brian Fleury is going to come in and say, hey, buddy, we're going to run the option this year, start doing sprints after practice, that way you can keep up with my offense. So when you ask the question with a first-time play caller of what the Seahawks offense is going to look like in 2026, I think this is where some feathers can be ruffled, and I don't mean this in a mean way. I mean this with the long-term betterment outlook of the team. I don't think that Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to have the type of year he had last year again in 2026, and I don't mean that just from a sense of, oh, let's predict a regression from a player who had nearly 1,800 yards. What I mean by this is the discrepancy in targets from Jackson Smith-Njigba and his teammates was more extreme than we've seen from other great receiving seasons over the past couple of years. Justin Jefferson, when he won his Offensive Player of the Year in 2022, had other teammates have over 90 targets, and KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen have over 100 targets that season. And last year, for reference, the second highest player on the team in targets was Cooper Kupp with 70, followed by AJ Barner with 68, then Kenneth Walker coming in fourth with just 36 targets. And in 2024, when Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown, T. Higgins still had over 100 targets, Mike Gesicki had over 80 targets, and Chase Brown and Andre Josephus each had over 60 targets as well. There were 4+ players with 60+ targets on each the Vikings and Bengals, while the Seahawks only had 3 players with more than 40 targets last year. And we mentioned this earlier in the video as well, but the Seahawks were bottom 5 in passing attempts in 2025, which I do expect to continue in 2026. And with the Seahawks offensive philosophy with Brian Fleury as the team's offensive coordinator, I will be fully transparent when I expect Seahawks fans to get frustrated with him at times, because I think there's going to be this overarching philosophy from Mike Macdonald, not to say that he's a control freak in that he's going to override everything, where if they want to dial up a deep passing concept, that Macdonald's going to come over the headset and say, run the ball, because I don't think that's going to be the case. But Brian Fleury also has a bit of a defensive background. When he was with the 49ers in 2019, his first year there, he was a defensive quality control coach. He coached with the Browns over 10 years ago and was a linebackers coach, meaning there's both sides of the football that he's coached, which is another reason I think Mike Macdonald wanted to bring him in the first place. So whenever you think about complementary football and having the offense be in advantageous situations set up by the defense, whether it be because of short field situations or turnovers, I think the Seahawks are going to be a bit more of a conservative offense in 2026 than you probably think heading into the year. Which I want to hammer home is not a bad thing, and if you would prefer the word balanced offense rather than conservative, I would be fine with that as well. My point is, I don't think the Seahawks are going to be this big play or die team, and their philosophy, especially offensively, is going to be to grind teams down over the course of a game and have AJ Barner and Robbie Oots out on the field. That way, instead of 5 offensive linemen, we can effectively have 7 offensive linemen in the run game out there and present more favorable opportunities for either Jadarian Price or Zach Charbonnet in the run game. And then if we want to run a play action concept, whether it's JSN running a deep post or simply having him run an out route because he can fake the deep post and then hit the out route and be wide open because JSN is a very smooth route runner, the options for this offense are going to be limitless. My whole point with Brian Fleury having a defensive background is he's going to coach this offense this year and call plays with the idea in mind that he's also going to not want to turn the football over as much as the Seahawks did last year. Winning cures everything, as we all know that. And whether you know this or not, the Seahawks finished 31st in turnovers offensively last year, and whether you know this or not, because again, 14 wins in a Super Bowl cures everything, the Seahawks actually had a negative turnover difference last year yet won the Super Bowl. So whenever I say the Seahawks are going to be more conservative this year, what I mean by that is more of a methodical and slowly grind teams down over the course of a game. That way in the fourth quarter, we can have AJ Barner out there and Robbie Eust out there getting 5 or 6 yards, leading the way for Jadarian Price or Zach Charbonnet as the season wears on. So from a statistical standpoint, I kind of would be surprised if Sam Darnold has a third straight 4,000-yard passing season, and if in the scenario this offense is way against what I think heading into the year, and this gets clipped in December or January, and Darnold has a career year beyond career years and has 45 passing touchdowns, my thought process heading into the season is that they're going to truly play as much complementary football as they can, and that they're going to run the football a lot. And with or without Darnold throwing for 4,000 yards, this is still going to be a very good team. There was such a discrepancy last year in receiving yards, with JSN having nearly 1,800 and the second and third receivers on the team having less than 600, and my entire point here is I don't think the Seahawks internally want to have that large of a discrepancy again for a second consecutive year. So when you ask the question of what the team's ceiling is heading into 2026 and look at what they're going to try to do offensively week in and week out, which is really grind teams down over the course of a game and effectively let the defense do what they do best, which is suffocate teams with their pass rush and let Mike Macdonald be Mike Macdonald as the team's defensive play caller, while turning the ball over less offensively, coming off of a year in which they were second to last in turnovers, yet still won the Super Bowl. Guys, to me, the team ceiling for the Seattle Seahawks entering 2026 is simple, and there's a very real possibility, even with everything the Rams did this offseason, that the Seattle Seahawks can without a doubt repeat as Super Bowl champions. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel as we will have previews for every NFL team leading up to the 2026 NFL season. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to check them out below, and until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.